Right, let's get to color grading. I know it's been ages since I last posted a video. I'm very sorry, but let's just not waste any time and get right into it. This is an example of an image where there's essentially no contrast. And this whole video is going to be about contrast because I want to show you guys how to take your footage from this to this, okay, just with grading. So first of all, if I turn everything off, this is our log footage, and this is in S-Log3, so I'm converting to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then I have a CST at the end going to Rec 709. So if I turn on the CSTs, this is the in-camera footage, okay? So just, wow, what is going on? So you can see from the waveform that there is no contrast, okay? And for those of you who are sort of more new to color grading, the waveform, it's a representation of like left to right in the image. So physically, if I get the qualifier out, and you can, if you press display qualifier focus, you can actually see where in the image that you're looking. So this is the left hand side, this is the middle, this is the right hand side of the image, and the height of the waveform determines the brightness of that particular part of the image. So obviously the peaks of our mountains here are literally these peaks right here, and then our darker parts of our image are a little bit lower down. So the higher up the waveform is, the brighter the image. So if I take a node and I do this, you can see that the waveform is moving up because I'm increasing the luminosity or the brightness of the whole thing. Okay, cool. So contrast is the difference between the darkest part and the brightest part of the image. Okay, so the reason this looks so flat, or the reason we can tell that there's no contrast, is because the darkest part of the image and the brightest part, it's in a very narrow, in a very thin band. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to get this going on, which obviously looks a lot better. And this is just grading. This looks like a log to Rec 709 conversion, but we've already done that. Okay, so how do we add all of this contrast without breaking our image and making it look really bad? So first of all, I'm going to show you the curve that I have put in here, and this is what it looks like, and we're going to redo it from scratch. So reset node grade, and what I want to do here is I want to pull a lot of the shadows down, because at the moment we don't really have any shadows. We want something going on down here, okay? And that's going to be affected by this part of our curve. So if I bring this up, it's going to lift our shadows. And if I bring it down, you can see that it's pulling the whole image down, but that's because this entire part of the curve is also moving. So if I click a point here, for example, and I start to pull this down, it's only going to affect the shadows. And can you see, look at the peaks. Look at the peaks, the tips of the mountains. When I move this around, they're not really moving very much compared to, for instance, this part or this part of the plane wing that's moving a lot more. Okay, cool. So typical S-curve contrast is going to be pulling your shadows down, pulling your highlights up, and like already you can see the difference, okay? But when I look at this, it still looks very flat. And by flat, I mean, for me, what this means is the mid-tones need to be pulled down a little bit. So it just looks quite faded still, okay? You can click on the screen and it will create a point on your curve. And that will essentially, if you move this point, it's now affecting that specific area. So for example, let's just pull the shadows down a little bit and then pull this up. Okay, cool. So now maybe I want to bring my midtones down a little bit more. So I'm going to get a point here and I'm going to start to pull this back. Okay. And now these highlights are also coming down a little bit too, because our highlights, if I click here, are in this sort of region of our curve. Okay. So when I move this point, it's also, can you see that it's also affecting this part of the curve? So maybe I want to grab this and pull it up, and look what we're grabbing now. Look at the waveform, okay? And now look at the mountains. Okay, we're moving this, but look at this part. If I move this point, nothing's really going on because I've just taken the peaks. Okay, so let's just go back. Let's just go back. Let's just go back. So first, start by adding some very simple contrast, just by doing this. Okay, cool. Now it still looks very faded. So we want to grab our mountain peaks. So I might click a point and start to bring this up. But now I'm affecting my shadows too much. So I want to start to bring those down. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, nice. Maybe I want to bring this down a little bit more. And you have to be very careful manipulating the curve too much, because if I bring this down, you can see that it starts to, this is now, we've just completely broken our image. Or if I bring this up and then, can you see that this, it's just, because now what you're doing is, you're making brighter parts of your image darker than darker parts of your image. Do you see what I mean? So this part of the image, which is brighter than this part, as in moving left and right on the graph, is now darker than the parts of the image that are supposed to be darker than it, if that sort of makes sense. So you want to keep this S shape, okay? And then, okay, so let's bring these shadows down a bit. So you can see that I've pulled my highlights down a little bit too much. So maybe I'll just bring this across. Okay, maybe we think it's too dark. So let's bring this up. Let's bring our dark points down and just look at the difference. Just, I mean, that is absolutely mind-blowing. That's just with contrast, okay? And if I go to the vector scope, you'll see that I've introduced loads of saturation as well. So we just pulled all of this saturation out, okay? And if I go back to the waveform, we've pulled all of our highlights up, we've pulled our midtones and shadows down, and what we've done is we've created this really, really beautiful look. Okay, so then in terms of how I made this shot look like the final grade, which you saw at the start of the video, I'm using Dehancer to introduce a little bit of color. If you don't have Dehancer, I can show you sort of how to do this separately very quickly. So let me just delete this node. So I was going for, there was a little bit of split toning. So for example, what we can do is if I press R to select red in our graph, and let me just make this a bit bigger, I can create a point here and then start to pull this down. And can you see what it's doing to the shadows if I do on and off? Can you see that it's introducing some teal? And you can even see it in the waveform here, okay? And it's not going to affect our highlights. So this is just a really simple way to start introducing some sort of colors into your, some teal into your undertones. Okay, cool. And then maybe we want to take our gamma and move it a little bit more towards the orangey pink region. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can introduce split toning, but this is just a very, very simple way. Okay, but the main juice happens in your custom curves, because look at the difference when I turn this on and off. I'll go full screen. Okay, so what am I doing here? Number one is hue versus hue. This is absolute magic. So if you take a blue point and a cyan point, you move the blue up a little bit, and you can use the slider here as well. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm rotating the hue, and if I go to the vector scope, you'll be able to see very clearly what's going on. So if I delete these points and I do it again, what's happening is I'm just swinging those hues over a little bit. And if you look at this part of the vector scope, can you see how it's moving ever so slightly more towards cyan? So this was sort of a dark blue, and now we've pulled it to more of a sort of teal, and it just looks amazing. It looks so, so good. And then to make this area sort of pop out a little bit more, I've just gone into hue versus sat, and I've brought up the cyan as well, so you can see what that's doing. So if you look at the plain wing, we're just introducing a bunch of color. And obviously, like, This is just a stylized look. Like this, there is no teal source of light here. So if you wanted to keep it sort of more natural looking, you can just leave it like that. Or just take or forget the whole teal look and keep this sort of more black and white. Like, again, color grading, you can just do whatever you want. It's whatever you think looks good. So I've added a bunch of saturation in the red and yellow areas. So you can see what this is doing. If I punch in here, it's just making these mountains pop out a little bit. And I'm really trying to accentuate this sort of sunset light, right? Okay, cool. And that's pretty much it. This hue versus luminance is not really doing much. It's just bringing up the brightness a little bit of our reds. But otherwise, if I show you before and after, look at that. So we're just making this pop out a little bit more. And then to finish, I have a power window, which is just giving us a little bit of a vignette. So I've gone into my window here. I've created a circle or an oval here. And then I've just added a tiny bit of sort of boost in the gamma. And I've added a little bit of contrast. So, and I usually do this with editable splines, so you can see I've done this a little bit. So with editable splines, if you click this point here, you can now drag this, and actually, wait, hold on. Let me just link all of these. You can now drag this and create a really beautiful curve. So I'm just gonna pull this up a little bit, and you can pull this down to create some more contrast. And if I just do before and after, we're just creating a nice bit of pop in the middle. And then on the outside node, so you can do this by just pressing Alt-O or right-clicking on a node, go to Add Node, and then Add Outside. And then with this guy, we're just doing the opposite. So we're just pulling the gamma down. And this is a very easy way to create like a simple vignette. And again, you can go strong or as subtle as you like. And that's pretty much it. This is a node that I actually haven't really used in this grade, so I'm just going to take this off. And that's pretty much everything. I mean, look at this. That's Rec 709, and this is our grade. Rec 709 grade. And if I was to show you the log footage, I mean, this just is absolutely insane. Like, this is log to Rec 709, and then our full grade just looks absolutely beautiful. So I hope you guys found this useful. Yeah, creating contrast out of essentially nothing, I think is a really good skill to have, because sometimes you do just have shots with absolutely no contrast. So this is just my way of doing it. Pull in contrast and then start to add all of the color afterwards. So I hope you guys found this useful. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one.